to the Leadership Heart Podcast with Sandra J. Horton, the Growth Catalyst. Well, welcome to the Leadership Heart Podcast, where bold innovation truly meets the conscious leadership. I am Sandra J. Horton, a global leadership and change strategist. And this is where we explore what it truly means to lead with impact, intention, and heart. Thank you for joining us today. Today's conversation is truly one that I believe will resonate deeply with many of you, whether you are a leader, a caregiver, or someone navigating the complex systems in your own life. Today, I am joined by the incredible Christine Brunsden. I'll bring Christine up in one moment. Christine is a trust and estate practitioner. She is co-founder of Benefits 2 and the creator of the Ability Ecosystem. With more than 30 years of experience, she has helped families navigate these complex financial and legal systems. What makes her work truly powerful, that it's really deeply personal. Through her own lived experience, supporting family members with significant limitations, she has seen firsthand the gap between what families are entitled to and what they are actually able to access. Today, she is truly working to challenge that gap and build more connected, human-centered systems that truly support families. Christine, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sandra. It's a real pleasure. You and I have been connected for a good many years. And so, this is our kind of first opportunity to have these kinds of discussions online. So I'm really excited.
And thank you for going live too as well, because, many of these conversations can happen outside, but not online. And this is a powerful conversation because it started the foundations of you and what has really transformed your life and your advocacy for not only your only family, but for other individuals who are experiencing these profound challenges. And, it always starts with that moment of awareness. The moment where something in you, something shifts or something in your own internal world changes. So my first question then is, looking at your own story, what was that moment? What really made this so passionate, this focus, this life-changing movement that you're undertaking today?
Sandra, I've lived in a multi-generational disability family my entire life. I was born into a family with a sister who lived her entire life in a vegetative state until her eventual passing at age 47. And I've had disability all around me. I mean, my mother had a very bad back as a result of a fall down a flight of stairs. I've had, my dad has dementia. I've got a child with disabilities, and now I'm, guardian and grandmother to two kids with exceptional disabilities too. But, this kind of work always touched my life, even in my professional environment. When I was working as a fiduciary, as a planner in the estate area, was always talking about whether there was a family member with a disability and all of that. So I thought, I'm probably smarter than the average bear when it comes to this. And yet when my daughter experienced her own disability, I thought, well, maybe she would qualify for this at some point. And I sent her to the doctor multiple times, and the doctor kept telling her, well, you're not going to qualify for that. And in 2020, when the world slowed down, we held a summit, and day 5 of that summit was all about planning a legacy for family members with disabilities. And I had Dr. Wayne and another individual on the summit, and they were talking about the disability tax credit. And when I heard them talk, I said, oh, bingo, I know now she qualifies. So I tried again, get her to go to the doctor, no go. So I reached out to the two of them and I said, I've been trying, I've not gotten anywhere. The doctor seems to think that she's not going to qualify, but from everything you guys said, I think she does. Could you help me? Oh, sure, Christine, no problem. So I gave them all the assessments that had been done throughout her life, and they did up the application. And 3 weeks later, she was approved. And I thought, well, here's something that I thought I was pretty smart at, but obviously there was something I was missing. And so I asked them, and Dr. Wayne specifically, I said, it seems like to me, if I'm smarter than the average person about this thing and I struggled, that there's got to be a way of fixing the system, democratizing this so we help more people not to struggle. And that was the genesis of Benefits too, but it has just grown and grown and grown since then into a lot more. And I don't think I chose this work. I think this work chose me.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've continued going down the path and more of the choosing happened, it opened my eyes to even a broader perspective of what it's like to navigate a life with disability, even if it's not you, even if you're the caregiver or someone else. What's it like to navigate that? There's no systems that make this easy for anyone. And it's almost like the cards are stacked against you. They make the people who have the least number of spoons available, they make it harder for them. And so my goal now is really to make sure that it's not harder, that we do everything we can to make it easier for this, this population of folks who struggle.
And I love that. And I want to acknowledge your beautiful little puppy in the background. I've you know how much I love little pups and stuff. So feel free if you need to make some movements or bring up your puppy into the conversation, feel free as well.
Oh, good.
This is the lovely thing about being live. I love it. And we're always balancing things, aren't we? Like we're balancing our family, we're balancing, our little furry friends as well. We're balancing a lot of different things. And when you add some complexity where, things may not be as easy as, getting up and walking over here, there's a lot more to move. There's a lot more, things that surround us, that there's new consideration. So we can be as aware, we can be, like you said, smarter than the average bear, but really when we're faced with all of these challenges, it can make some people, what I've seen, feel stuck or overwhelmed. Yes. And it's almost like a grieving process. Like there's a lot to have to go through. So how have you been able to help individuals? I know you did trusts before and all the work you're doing now. How do you help people and families and just to stop and to ground and not be overwhelmed and stuck? Because there's a lot of things that you have to navigate through.
I think for me, like I see this on a day in, day out basis. Mm-hmm. And I know what it's like to navigate this. Mm-hmm. So my ears are always open, my head to the ground kind of, and nose to the grindstone. And I'm always looking for families I can help, because that's mm-hmm. how this works today. When someone is given a key or someone is shown a door in this world, this population is more apt to help the next person find the key, open the door, introduced to things. And I've made it my mission to help as many people as I can. So lucky for me, I'm a master networker. So I have a huge network of people, and I just put my feelers out to everybody. I don't care. Like, you got to think about what percentage of the Canadian population actually has a disability today. And it's essentially 27%. So if you're in a room full of, 5 people, let's call it, like you're going to see at least one in that room that likely should qualify. So I've made it my mission to tell everybody I can about this, and to make sure that, if there's people out there that they think could benefit from that they reach out to me, that nobody struggles. Just send them my way and I'll help them out.
And I think that's really powerful. It's about that connection and also moving past just ourselves and into a place of choice, of taking action. So, within this, there's lots of different areas we can go. We're going to talk about access. We're going to talk about, changes in the system. We're going to talk about individual responsibilities. So when this started the bigger, higher level, the systems change, the big picture. So from your experience of having, family members going through this system of persons living with limitations. I prefer to use that than disabilities, limitations. We all have limitations, but it's known limitations. What needs to change? And this is a bigger question, but what high level needs to truly change from a systems level in order for people to access? Let's start there. Access to be, for it perhaps to become simpler, easier, maybe human-centered. Let's start on access.
Okay. So for me, I think the biggest access question is that people don't have to find the benefits anymore, that the benefits will find them. We're in a world of AI. AI can do a lot of things for us, and we're still leaving a lot of this up to chance. And one of the big reasons I think that access fails is that there are 200 plus federal and provincial programs. And I think the population really expects that, well, I'm sure that if I'm eligible for something, my doctor is going to tell me about it, or they figure somebody's going to tell them. They don't realize there's no easy way for that to happen. And with AI and with patients owning their own medical records, that becomes a really easy thing to do, because we can have you own your medical records. We can have those medical records systematically reviewed, and we can figure out where there's a possible benefit and alert you to it and say, you could be qualified for this. Would you like to pursue it? Right? So it's not leaving things up to chance anymore of you, well, maybe I'll find it, or maybe somebody will let me know. No, there's an actual way of figuring this out. And it's really this AI layer that sits between medical records and all the applications that need to be filled out.
Because my understanding right now for accessing, it's usually an individual situation, and that you can apply for one point at a time, and that's part of the challenge. So if you identify through your physician, because that's usually the bottleneck, right? The physician comes in, identifies, yes, you have a limitation, you can then apply for a tax credit. That seems really cumbersome. What if you have multiple?
You want me to tell you how wrong that would be, that assumption? Because I sit in the desk that I sit in. And so every day I have somebody that calls me. I'll give you a couple notable situations. I had one where the lady went to her doctor on the advice of her accountant, 88 years old, and she approached her doctor and said, I'd like to apply for the disability tax credit. And he looked at her and said, well, you're 88 years old and people lose mobility and start peeing their pants at your age. I'm not signing that.
Wow. And
I think, dude, like, I'm sorry, but that's exactly what this credit is designed for. So you're not helping your patients who really, like I said, if you think she's not spending money on incontinence supplies and all the other things, then what are you thinking she's doing? Right? And extra washes and all kinds of things. Like, of course, there's always an expense to disability. Right? So that's only one example, but there's so many other things. Oh, for sure, if I sign that, I'm going to get audited by the government, which is what some doctors will say. Or, no, you have to be in a wheelchair and not be able to push it, yourself. So they have all these preconceived ideas or misconceptions, I guess, really about what qualifies. But then when I asked Dr. Wayne, I said, so tell me, throughout med school, how many hours of instruction did you get on the disability tax credit? He said, well, that's an easy answer. 0. I said, oh, okay. Well, now it makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. And it's fascinating. Have, worked in healthcare most of my life and doing other, consulting on the side as well. There truly is a lot of myths and there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of unknowns that are out there. And to me, it really seems that we need to simplify this conversation. We need to, do some additional new training, some new enhancements to both the patient side, the provider side as well.
I think I
So
can sum
with
up in one word and say it's archaic.
Yeah. No, it for sure. So are there any common terms? Are there things that, listeners, the audience should know now that maybe if they don't know, they should go and investigate, because this may come up for them? I'm just thought, let's start there. Let's do some education and training.
So, and our website has a lot of that information about,
Perfect.
kind of what qualifies. I think,
Mhm.
people get stuck in thinking, well, okay, well, what conditions qualify? But the one thing that people don't realize about this credit is it is not about your diagnosis at all. It is really about how does your limitation affect your ability to perform all the necessary everyday tasks that we all have to perform, which we would consider activities of daily living or an ADL. So how does your condition cause you to take 3 times longer than someone who doesn't have your limitation? And does it affect you generally 90% of the time? So we think about, somebody who has a really hard time with breathing. Well, it affects their walking. It's not something else. It's not about, they have to have oxygen therapy. No. People with COPD and other conditions, oftentimes when they're walking 100 meters, they're taking small breaks throughout that journey just to catch their breath. And so it does take them 3 times longer to walk 100 meters. So these are all the things, and you can go look at all the different criteria, but people who, I think incontinence is a big one. I talk about that one a lot because I think there's a stigma around that. People don't even go to see their doctor about it. They just think, oh, it's part of normal aging. It's just what's going to happen to me. But no, it's actually something that they should go and talk to the doctor about. And then you have some people saying, well, it's too embarrassing. I'm too embarrassed to go talk to them. Well, yeah, but if you knew it meant, and I'll give you a real example. We had somebody apply with incontinence. So they submitted their application on January 31st of 2023. They were approved on February 8th. The adjustments were done, and they had over $13,000 deposited to their account 2 weeks later. Incontinence supplies.
Wow. That's awesome. Just saying, why can't this happen to help support others? I mean, that's the thing. That's an N of 1. It just kind of shocks you, because I really think part of this whole access is people don't know that they actually do qualify for this, and what is the right language to use in order to be successful, to get these outcomes. And that's why, Christine, and your great work, I think that's a powerful place that you are holding now to help people, to guide them through how to fill out these forms. Because as I said, with access, it has traditionally been, this is just one thing that you can apply for, but really you need to streamline that. So this shift into, talking a little bit more about that, because people are complex. So how do we shift then to get more than just one thing looked at, approved, so that we have more of these successes?
I think, again, it's going to come down to the AI integration layer where, I think about things like, again, I go back to incontinence because it happens on both ends of the spectrum. So there's a program for children. And if you're age 3 or older and you're still incontinent, there's a grant program for that. So if I look back to, my daughter's application was one thing, but my granddaughter's application was a whole different thing. Again, I kind of thought, well, maybe the pediatrician would bring it up, but she didn't. And it was me, and I brought it up. And she said, of course she will qualify. But if you could fill it out for me, that would be great. And I'm thinking, well, lucky for you, I am who I am, and I can do this with competently, and without too much stress and anxiety around. Like, most people look at a 16-page government form, they're not jazzed about filling it out and trying to figure out what goes where and how do I say it.
Yeah.
So, she filled it out, or I filled it out. She signed it, and she reviewed it and signed it. She made one small little wording change. But then I slowly it's over time. And these things are not, it's not like you just go to a website and you look and it shows you all the things. So eventually over time, these things keep getting brought up through people in my network. Hey, did you know that a child over the age of 3 who still can't toilet themselves, there's a grant available for that? I had no idea. Right. So as I'm kind of walking through this experience myself, my eyes are constantly being open to all of the things that I could be missing. And then it makes me think, well, what else am I missing? What is it that I haven't been told yet? What keys are missing? What doors are camouflaged that I just haven't come across? And I think, AI has that ability. It really does have that ability to identify. Like, we know what there's criteria. And certainly we wouldn't be able to have, a doctor wouldn't be sitting there with a repository of criteria for 200 plus benefits in their head. And every time a patient comes in, reviewing that Rolodex, that's the way I think about it. I'm so old that way, but I think about like the Rolodex of criteria going through their head going, well, I wonder if there's any financial benefits this patient that's in front of me might be able to access. They're not thinking that way. When you go in there and you look at the average patient visit here in Canada, it's 12 minutes long. Yeah. They're not thinking about what financial benefits you may qualify for out there. It's, what is your issue today? How can I help you solve it? I'm interested in patient care. Doctors go to school to practice patient care, not to fill out government paperwork. And a lot of them have a real, it's acrimonious for them. They don't want to fill it out. And not always because they just don't like doing paperwork, but they're also fearful of, well, what if I fill it out incorrectly and my patient is somehow denied? Are they going to come back and blame me? So there's a lot of that going on too. You have to think about it from both sides, but I think we didn't make it easy for them. If we really wanted to, why wouldn't we make it so that we can actually, and this is what we did with the application, is we put it into a web-based application format. But I realized that about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more, there was an application I had to do again for my granddaughter. And so I worked with a social worker at what's called one of these hubs to do this application. But what nobody told me was that I couldn't use the same email address I had used for my grandson 6 months before that. So the entire application, my hour and a half to 2 hours on the phone with her, just disappeared. It was gone.
Wow, that's heartbreaking.
It was
frustrating.
For someone who's a caregiver, and again, every moment of time counts because you're trying to fit in so much. It was heartbreaking for me. I was thinking, and I'm not only that, I'm cognizant of the fact that this lady, this social worker, gave me all this time. But then I thought, I'm going to try and do this myself, maybe with some help of AI, and let's see what happens. Just like for funds, right? Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, I don't want to identify her through AI because I know that, there's training models and I have those things turned off, but I'm very careful. So I used only her name. I used her age. I used all of her diagnoses, and I knew what her functional limitations were. So I did that. And then I called the hub and I spoke to a different social worker there. And I said, has anybody ever had a conversation with the government to find out what garners more money for families who are applying for this particular benefit? She said, actually, funnily enough, we just had that conversation with the government. And I said, oh, well, that's great. Did you happen to take notes at all? She said, yes, I did. And I have them right here, actually. I said, could you share those notes with me? She said, I don't see why not. So she sent me her notes. And I saw from the hierarchy of what was it that I needed to create these goals around. And actually, there was one goal I hadn't created with the social worker the first time, and it happened to be the most important thing. So I went through and I chose all of these areas that I needed to create these goals for. Well, in the form itself, the goal says you have to create the goal in 500 characters or less. And I remember distinctly from my conversation, part of the reason why this took so bloody long was because we kept sitting there trying to figure out how to fit what we wanted to say in the box of 500 characters, changing all the ands to ampersands, blah, blah. Like I was thinking, this is the craziest process I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I did what I needed to do with using my large language model, and then I said, build me a sleep goal for the following child with the following conditions and the following functional limitations, and do it in 500 characters or less. Boom. And it was done.
Good prompt. Done.
Right. But there was a lot of information that went in on the front end of this. So anyway, so I did this. I did the whole application. And then there's a piece in the application where you can tag, your social worker. So I tagged her and I sent her a little note and I said, by the way, I've redone the application now. Could you go in and have a look and just make sure I'm on the right track? And the phone rang almost immediately. And she said to me, Christine, who did this application? And I said, well, it was me. I said, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I had help using AI. She said, what? I said, yeah. I said, I basically built out a large language model that told the large language model all about M. And I said, and then I went and I talked to your people and I got all of the information I needed to about what goals to build out. And I kind of remembered what we had talked about as well. And she said, and you didn't have to muck around with the size of the words and changing ands to ampersands and all that. I said, no, none of that. And she said, honestly, this was the best written application. She said, I couldn't even have written a better application if I did it myself.
Wow.
And I knew at that moment,
life-changing,
like,
really.
Yes, now we're on something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's life-changing. And also it's like, it's allowing you to have that aha moment. And for those who are listening and those who are, coming board, if you've had this frustration, if you've gone through this repeated, challenges of having to fill out these forms, because that is the system right now. And that system, perhaps I would say, is more siloed than it is connected. Using AI for this kind of purpose, but ensuring the confidentiality, making sure that it's safe, etc., really led to a positive outcome. And I think that's the most important thing for all of us today to take away, is not to be frustrated, but to find new solutions that you can use to move things forward. And really, it's also bringing back the power back to the individual, right? Not just being reactionary to a system that is archaic, that isn't working in the favor of that patient. So let's kind of move forward with this a little bit more, because we were talking a little bit about that intersection between the family member and the physician. So how do you help family physicians with your organization, with what you're doing, to help ensure more successes so that we can continue to advocate, continue to move things forward? Oh, so I don't hear.
We must have done something right along the way, because we must have done something right along the way, because there are a number of doctors across Canada who send their patients to us on a regular basis. I have no idea who the doctors were, but I do hear from certain patients saying, oh, my doctor sent me here, or the clinic I went to sent me to you guys. And we do get calls from clinicians who say, what is it you guys do? And how do you, okay, well, how can I send patients there? And we do get calls from doctors saying, how can I join your network of doctors to sign off on applications? Because that was the one thing that really was the sticker. I told you what really was the sticking point for me was I couldn't get the doctor to sign off. But Dr. Wayne has been doing this for a long time, and he's been able to garner a bit of a network of doctors who are all willing and very proud to advocate for people who living with disabilities to be able to apply. And so as long as you've got medical records for them to be able to, review your condition and, potentially have a consultation with you just to make sure. But usually if the records are all there and everything matches, they're good to go. But, it's one of those things where access, again, it's a barrier. And then the whole doctor piece, another barrier. But slowly, I think we're making headway, and physicians are really starting to identify the benefit. And I do have some of them call me. I actually had a woman's doctor call me, and he said, well, I don't see what's much different from the application that I filled out that was denied and the application you did. And I said, I can tell you the difference is that you said she needed to be close to a bathroom when she was shopping. But really, that's not the only time she needs to be close to a bathroom. You just mentioned that but I said, Siri doesn't like the word shopping because she don't need to shop to live, right? But she'd have to be near a bathroom anywhere she goes. Yeah. Because that moment may hit. So he said, oh, I wasn't thinking about it that way. So again, unless you have intricate knowledge of some of these things and you know what the guardrails are. So this comes to, I think, the experience intelligence of things. And when I say experience intelligence, I'm really talking about lived experience plus professional experience plus contextual situational experience, right? So we marry all those things up together, and you have a much better methodology and of actually making things better, because you have all of the types of experience around it, where a doctor has their own experience, a tax person has their own experience, but very few people can pull all the pieces together and have all the experience. Plus the lived experience, I think, is a big thing. Like I told you, this was very eye-opening. Bringing 2 children through all of these, and I can tell you I've delivered, now it's 14 forms in the last 18 months to this pediatrician but I've filled them all out because there's no way I'm going to get her to fill out all of these forms. So she's very, very appreciative of that. And I think more doctors will see the benefit. I think if anything I've learned through this is that we could really save doctors, just from the disability tax credit alone, about 1.5 million patient visits per year.
Wow, that's substantial. And, we talk about that, the innovation and technology and the change and the opportunity is there for sure. And that's why I wanted to, have you on the Leadership Heart podcast, because Christine, you're living this experience, like you said, and you're out there, but you're creating the change. You're bringing in new solutions to help not only just your own family, but all families that are across Canada. So as we kind of come to the end, I'd love to know what is your big, hairy, audacious legacy goal with all of this work, because it's so important and it's so meaningful. And for some people, they may not want to talk about these things, but we have to, having gone through parents that aged in place. I'm at that end, now going this way. I want my family to know, if I need supports, I need access to benefits or things, that there's a way, there's an organization like yours to come to for help and for support. So what's your big, hairy, audacious legacy goal?
You know what? It's not even a big, hairy goal. It's really to make sure that when I'm no longer here, that the 2 children that mean the most to me in this world have an easier way of navigating all of this. But the bigger the ripple and the waves of all that means that it's not just them, it's everyone like them, and everyone who happens to be a caregiver looking after them. Like, nobody should be struggling in this day and age. We should not be struggling. So if anything I can do is really, it's really a legacy of making sure that the people who have the least amount of time and ability to put towards paperwork really are not the ones that struggle the most. We should make it as easy as possible for all of those people to gain access to what they need, and making sure that each individual person has access to their own medical records. That's a big, huge piece for me, because as I stare down the barrel of dad with dementia, at a certain point in time, we're okay, because there's still members of the family that, know who his doctor was and all of that. But you think about it, if only one parent is remaining and that parent starts to lose their capacity, you may end up finding yourself on the side of not being able to find records, not being able to access records because the parent can't remember which doctors they were going to for certain things. And so you may lose out on some of those eligibility years of benefits because that information is lost.
Mm-hmm. And that's real for so many. I mean, there's all of us, aging baby boomers that are heading out. There's the older adults that are all there. And this is a real situation. This is things that, like I said at the very beginning, this can for some people be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a needed conversation. And it's a conversation that I'm so thrilled to have with you. So as we move forward, how do people reach out to you? Where can they get a hold of you? Because I know on the podcast that people are going to reach out to you because you're doing such great work. So where can they go
Thank
to?
you, Sandra. So I think the best place is just go to the Benefits 2 website, which is just benefits2.ca. And everything they need in order to access me and my team is all there.
Thank you so much. And again, as we wrap this up, what I've heard today is the importance of understanding the three main areas that are really challenge points right now that are being addressed. Process, how fast this happens, really is up to all of us. What responsibility can we take as individuals? Not just one person, but each and every one of us. So as you listen to this, consider access and navigation. It really truly needs to be simplified. The system itself must be connected and not siloed because it is currently, and that the power must shift back to the individual, the patient, a patient-centered approach. And I know across healthcare, this is something that is always paramount. But in reality, it's that intersectionality between healthcare, patient care, all the other, services that come into alignment when someone is living with a limitation. So these are all big systems changes, but together, the people like Christine, who are doing the good work to create those shifts now and using the new technology. That's why at the Leadership Heart podcast, we love this intersection between the passion, the heart, and using, innovation technology to create the change that we want to see in this world. So thank you, Christine, for joining us at the Leadership Heart podcast. If this conversation truly has resonated for you, I invite you to share it with someone else who may need to hear this. Because I know, as someone who's gone through the parenting elder parents process, dementia, things like that, there's an opportunity to connect with Christine. And so please do start this conversation, keep it going, because our own personal leadership, how we look at these things, are we open to receive this information? Yes, is what I'm hoping you'll say. It's not just about what we build, it's about the impact that we can all see over time. So let's go and work together, collaborate together to create a more positive and really empathetic system that helps support all of us, regardless of how we show up, regardless of our limitations, because each of us should have access to so many different things. So with that, I conclude. I can't wait to meet with you all again on the Leadership Heart podcast. We'll have another exciting, amazing guest to share their passions, their ways of creating the leadership with heart. Thank you. And I'll see you on the other side, Christine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sandra.